Before we start off, I'd like to do a little poll. Who of you is looking for some kind of a little dictatorship on a small island or something? Hands up. Okay, this is the right lecture for you. Who is living in a country or thinks he lives in a country where internet content filtering is applied? Okay, this is the right lecture for you too. And who doesn't care at all? Okay, you you will see why you should care. Okay, I think we'll start now. Okay, the next lecture is about censorship, and the title is, as you can see, the worst part of censorship is XXX. I thought it has something to do with porn, but nope. Okay, the lecture is held by Sebastian Wolfgarten. He's currently working at T-Mobile and is there responsible for network security. So he's the right guy to hold this lecture. Yeah, it's about content filtering. I see there are a number of people coming in. Okay, it's about content filtering on a large-scale basis in the usual suspect countries and especially China. Okay, I'll just hand over to him. Give a warm welcome applause to Sebastian.
Okay, thank you very much for coming. I know it's very early already, but you're here, so thanks for that. I was up until 3 o'clock working on this presentation, so I know what it's like being up late. Basically, my presentation is called, or actually the subtitle says it all, basically investigating large-scale internet content filtering. What this means is just another word of saying we're looking at internet censorship. That was something, the reason why I'm doing this talk is because I had to write a master's thesis and I needed a topic, and so I came up with this topic. And my professor said, oh no, we can't say censorship because my original idea was to call this thing how to circumvent the Great Firewall of China. But then my professor said, oh no, we can't do this because we have so many Chinese students and the Chinese embassy is just down the road and we don't want to have trouble. So I said, okay, let's call this investigating large-scale internet content filtering, and which is apparently the same, but it has a better title. And it's funny that people think that the X's actually stand for something. Yesterday a guy said, okay, the X's must stand for Google, don't they? Or now he said it should stand for porn, but it doesn't stand for anything. I just like the title because it's a bit of a pun, a play on words, because basically the worst part of the censorship is the censorship itself, because information wants to be free. But just let's start with the talk and stop this boring stuff. Okay, basically we have a small preface where I'm just going to tell you something about my motivation, how this all started. Then we're going to take a look at the filtering techniques that you can employ as an adversary. Here in this talk, in large scale, I don't mean companies or something, I mean countries. So we're going to take a look at the different layers that you can use and the different techniques that you can use to do filtering on a large scale in any country. And then we're going to take a very nice but brief look at the current situation in the People's Republic of China, where I rented a server with a bit of hassle, but I rented a server a couple of months ago in China, and I did all my experiments from there. And the last thing is that I'm going to show you how to circumvent the filtering in China. Okay, so we start with the actual presentation. Well, who the fuck are you? Basically, I'm just, as Dan Kaminsky said yesterday, just a random stranger. Prior to working with the network security group of T-Mobile, I used to do penetration testing with Ernst & Young for 4 years. And yes, as I said before, I have a master's degree in security and forensic computing from Dublin City University. And the next slide might be a bit strange, but I thought it's something worth taking into this presentation. Maybe some people in this room are interested in getting certificated as, or actually getting a degree in IT security. And so I thought maybe I put a little ad in there, and I swear I'm not paid by the university to say this, but if you're interested in studying IT security, and if you have a spare year, then I can really recommend this course. It's in Dublin, it's in Ireland, it involves a lot of drinking, but it also involves a lot of hacking. So we did a lot of biometrics, security, exploit coding, subverting the Linux kernel, we coded face recognition system, we coded cryptography stuff, so there's a lot of stuff in there, and I think the course is pretty unique, and 90% of all the fees are paid by the European Union, so it's relatively cheap to do, and I can really recommend this. So if you check out DCU's website, then I'm sure you'll find something interesting. The reason why I'm telling you this is because this has to do with the motivation for my talk. Okay, so basically, the motivation was my Chinese roommate, because I was living on campus at DCU, and my Chinese roommate was basically, he had a degree, he had a PhD degree in computer science, he was a Chinese guy, and he was working in the university as basically a teacher. So one day we were chatting away, and he was saying, yeah, well, you know, the internet in China becomes more and more active, and more people using it, and so on. I was like, oh, well, you know, internet in China is not really free, the information are not really free as they want to be, you know, they are censored. And although his English was very good, I have to say, he had no idea what the word censorship or to censor something means. I had a hard time explaining to him that the information he sees are not the information that are available. So he was totally unaware of the word to censor something. So I was like, okay, if somebody that has got a PhD degree in computer science is unaware, or maybe wants to be unaware of a word called to censor, then maybe other people don't know that the internet is censored. So I was interested in the idea of finding out how the actual filtering works in China, but also how to circumvent it. Obviously, there's always an element of curiosity. I mean, this is always to do with hacking or with technology, I think. And when you consider the recent events, many of you have probably heard that the Russian website, all of MP3 was blocked in Denmark. Maybe if we have any people from Denmark in the room, then they can tell us about this. Basically, we've seen more and more let's say, attempts by the government to prevent people from accessing certain sites. We have seen this in Germany, and I'm going to show you an example later on where there was a so-called blocking order, or in very formal German, that would be the Sperrungsverfügung, to block certain Nazi-related websites. So basically, I thought, okay, this is an area where we need some research, and so I decided to work on this. But now let's really start with this stuff. Okay, so do you have a question? Okay, sorry, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, so we have to take a look at the filtering techniques. Basically, from a technology point of view, you can do filtering at two levels. You can do filtering at what's called the network layer, and you can do it at the application layer. When you take a look at the network layer, you can usually do filtering at what's called layer 3 and layer 4. You're all aware of the OC models and so forth, so I don't really need to explain this too much. But basically what you can do is you can do filtering on the application level. And on the application level, you can do stuff like proxies. You can filter at the proxy level. You can do a technique called deep packet inspection, which we're going to see later on. And you can do DNS manipulations, which seems to be the preferred way of doing large-scale internet filtering at the moment. Okay. So if we take a look at the OC model, and I'm, as I said, very aware of I'm sure you're all very aware of this graph. Basically, you can filter if you take a look, you can filter at this level, the application layer, but you can also filter at layer 3 and layer 4. And in Cisco syntax, for instance, these could be rules that you can use to block access to certain IP addresses at central network elements. Okay, so there's nothing special about this graph. It's just an illustration. Okay, so how does this work when you when you have a proxy server? Well, it's very simple. In a proxy server, you have a user that requests, when we consider the HTTP protocol, of course, then you have a user that uses a proxy server to connect to tries to connect to a website, and that request is actually forwarded to a central or transparent even proxy server. The proxy server takes that request, forwards it onto the actual website if the access control list on the proxy server allows the user to access the website. So basically, what you can do on the central proxy server, you can actually say you can actually set up access control lists just like you would do in your corporate environment, and the user is unable to access a certain site if the access control list does not allow this. Okay. Then what you can do is a technique that's called deep packet inspection. Deep packet inspection is actually a technology that comes from intrusion detection and intrusion prevention. So basically from network security. But you can also use this technology in the context of internet filtering. Because what you do is basically when the user sends some arbitrary data packet, you as the adversary can look into the packet and not only analyze its headers but also analyze its payload, so the content. So based on that content, you can use entropy analysis, you can do pattern matching and so forth to prevent users from accessing certain targets. Okay, and I have 4 demos, and one of the demos will actually illustrate this problem. You can do DNS manipulations. This is a scheme of how DNS works. Very briefly, it's not quite correct, but just to give you an introduction of how it works. And you can basically do these types of filtering. You can actually refuse to resolve a certain name. You can actually deny that the existence of a certain domain. You can hijack a certain domain, so that means that, for instance, Google does not resolve to the real IP address, but to any arbitrary IP address that you define. And maybe if the user tries to access google.com, then he will be given a fake IP address, and if he connects to that IP address, he will be redirected to a different website saying, okay, you're not allowed to access this and this domain. You can do name invalidation, which I'm going to show you very shortly, and you can do what you can basically be silent when somebody answers or actually requests a website from you. So as I'm sure you're all aware of the way DNS works, I'm going to show you a little example. Here it is. And basically what this should illustrate is basically the blocking order or the Sperrungsverfügung in my area where I'm coming from. I'm actually from North Rhine-Westphalia. So basically, I think it was in 2001 when all the providers in North Rhine-Westphalia were actually forced to block access to certain Nazi-related websites. And they did this actually by just doing DNS manipulation, okay? So one of the websites is actually stormfront.org, which is a Nazi-related website. And so I have a little flash demo here, which I'm going to show you now. This is the first of 4 demos. So now what we can see is I'm trying to do a host lookup, DNS lookup of the domain stormfront.org. So I'm typing in host www.stormfront.org, and we will see that I get an IP address back because I'm not using a North Rhine-Westphalia based provider. Now if I do the same request with a DNS server that is actually located in North Rhine-Westphalia, you will see that the DNS answer is manipulated in such a way as you can see stormfront.org has address 127,001. Okay, so this is a very, very easy way, but to be honest, it's still effective as we speak. So in the area of North Rhine-Westphalia, you will not be able to access this website simply because they have changed their DNS servers in such a way that this IP address is actually invalidated. Okay, so obviously this is a very easy way to circumvent because you can simply just use other DNS servers. Okay, this is not affected, but I think this is a very preferred way of using or of performing content filtering at the moment, because I think A, it's relatively easy to implement, and B, that's something even the politicians can understand. So if you tell them, oh, we got this great telephone book of the internet and we just ripped out one page, they will easily understand probably better than if you say, we're going to employ IP filtering at some central router element, okay? So they can probably understand that if you erase these elements or these answers from the DNS system, that's probably the best thing to do, or the easiest thing to do, okay? So, yeah. I don't want to access this website, but if some people want to, then they have to use different DNS servers, I guess. Okay, so if we go on. Okay, so as you can see, that was the first occurrence of DNS or of internet filtering in Germany at all. So it was only in North Rhine-Westphalia, and I think other states in Germany are not affected. But for instance, the scandal with all of mp3.com in Denmark, for instance, I think it's implemented in exactly the same way. Okay. So we come to the second part of this talk, and that's China. What I did for my master's thesis, I decided to go to China and actually check out in the network itself how it works. But I was, well, maybe I'm rather stupid, but I'm not insane. So I decided not to go to China directly, but rent a server. Okay. So I look up in Google, how can I rent a server in China? And it was apparently relatively difficult, especially because I had to fill out export forms from the German customs and so on. And when I was I'm from a very small town, so when I did come to the bank and said, look, I need to transfer money to China, they were like, what? Okay, and then the next thing was, well, what do you need it for? Yeah, well, I need to pay a dedicated internet server. I rented it in China. They were like, what? Okay, so they were totally unaware of what I was trying to do. So I said, well, you know, on eBay I bought this MP3 player, and now I need to pay it. And they're like, okay, yeah, that was okay. So yeah, but I had to fill out this export form. And I guess they would have questioned me if there was more money to be transferred, but it costed, maybe if you're interested, it cost I think around $135 or something to rent the server. So in comparison to Europe, it's relatively expensive. But at least the server was directly connected to to China Telecom in Shanghai. So at least I was aware of the fact that, or I was sure that I was actually in China. Okay. So this saved me from going over to China, because if you have ever seen a Chinese public bathroom, then you do not want to see Chinese prisons, you know. So I decided it's better to stay in Europe and to do all this stuff from here. Okay, basically, when we take a look at the internet in China, we have to take a look at what's called the OpenNet Initiative's internet filtering map. You can go to the website of the OpenNet Initiative, and you can get a flash thingy where it basically says all the countries. And although this talk is centered around China, it also holds true for countries like Thailand, Egypt, Iran, Vietnam, and all these kind of countries where there's internet filtering employed. And you can see there are different levels of filtering. Here in China, the actual level of filtering is truly pervasive. But for instance, when you would look up this for Germany, you would at least still get that Germany is on the watch list. Okay, so that's still a very interesting map, and it's frequently updated. Maybe you take a look at the numbers before we get into the guts. In China, they have at the moment, and that was from June 2006, around 130 million internet users. So that's actually the second largest number of internet users in the world. And it's only outbalanced by the United States of America. But as they have a growth of 20% per year, it is assumed that in a couple of years they will be the number one internet users in the world. Okay, and the best thing is these 130 million users, approximately, they're only about 9 or 10% of China's entire population. Okay, so there's a lot of people that still want to go on the internet, and I'm interested to see how the filtering continues with this rapid growth of user base, basically of the number of users. Okay, so if we come to what's actually blocked in China, there are actually some laws of what to block, basically. What you have to block is basically you have to block everything that's in some way contrary to the public belief, or at least not the public belief, but the belief that the state has. Okay, so everything that might subvert social security or social order is forbidden. For instance, you cannot say something against the constitution. You cannot say something that might destroy the unity of the country. You cannot say something that has to do with social stability. You cannot do something against, or cannot say something which involves gambling, violence, murder, and so forth. Okay, as you can see, this is very broad, and I think they did this on purpose because obviously, well, what does destroying the unity of the country mean? It could mean anything. When I was preparing my paper in June, July, and August of this year, there was a guy that was arrested because he apparently published contrary stuff or subversive information from a Yahoo account in Hong Kong, which apparently is a different country, but that doesn't matter really because Yahoo gave the information to the Chinese authorities, and that guy was imprisoned for 10 years for subverting the social order. So as you can see, there's a lot of information that is actually being censored in China. Okay, so if we take a look at the domain name system in China, basically, what I did, I decided, okay, how can you determine how the actual filtering is performed in China? So I said, okay, why not use a server in Germany and also a server in China, and then do DNS resolution on one server and DNS resolution on the other server and compare the results. Okay, so I created a sample data set of about 50 domains, which I thought that they would be filtered. That included stuff like CNN, the Playboy, and so forth, and various newspapers and television channels. And I wanted to know, are they blocked in Germany and are they blocked in China? And apparently about 20% of all the domains were blocked in China, but none of them were blocked in Germany. Okay, so if we take a look at the actual table that I came up with, you have stuff like Amnesty, which is a human rights organization, or Falun Dafa, which is a spiritual movement. You will see that actually the server fails to, the Chinese DNS servers fail to actually resolve those names. Okay, so you could, if you try to look up Wikipedia, you will actually get an error when doing the DNS resolution. Okay, so the same holds true for Greenpeace or Playboy or various other websites. But interestingly, there are some websites where there is like the government of Taiwan and World Press, where you can get worldwide news articles that are basically not answered at all. Okay, so you will run into a timeout if you try to resolve these domains. So sometimes they do server failures, and otherwise, for other domains, they don't answer your requests at all. Okay, and again, to illustrate this, I have a little flash demo. Hopefully we can all see this because I have a different resolution originally on my laptop. Okay, but at least you can see the left part, which is the important bit. Okay, so we have a Chinese server and a German server here, and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to do a host lookup of a certain domain on the left-hand side in China, on the right-hand side in Germany. You will see that, for instance, here I tried to resolve a domain called Falun Canada, which is the Canada appearance of Falun Dafa, a spiritual movement which is forbidden in China. And you will see that actually he tries to resolve, maybe I can stop this for a second, it gets a bit weird. Okay, so just to ensure that you all understand what happens. Basically is, okay, we have a website called, for instance, falunginfo.info, and you try to resolve the name in China. It first works, but then there's an error injected into your current connection, so which leads to what they call a serve fail. Okay, so basically you as a user end up not being able to communicate with this host because the DNS resolution does not work. Okay, and on the German server there's no problem because all the domains are repeatedly resolved. Okay, is that clear to everyone? Or basically what they do is they basically fake DNS replies. Okay, so they watch out for your DNS requests, and as you do them, they're actually faked. Okay, so if we continue this this little demo, I'm doing a request on the left-hand side. You will see, interestingly, that first of all, you get the right IP address, but then you get a serve fail error, so you won't be able to connect to this host. And on the German server, it's no problem to connect to this. The same holds true for the BBC, and in the German server, it's no problem to resolve this domain. On the Chinese server, you will get a server failure message. Okay, and there are some domains, I think it comes now, and yeah, well, free Tibet I think works, partially at least. But then if you go to certain domains, let's say, I think it now comes up with the government of Taiwan. First Amnesty, okay, Amnesty doesn't work either. But if you come up now with the government of Taiwan, yeah, you will see that there's no answer at all. Okay, so the packets are silently dropped as they go along. Okay, so it says no servers could be reached, and the same goes for peacehall.com, which is a website about the peace movement. And whereas in Germany there's no problem, in China you can't resolve the domain. Okay. So that's a very basic level of how to block people or of how to prevent people from accessing certain domains. Obviously, you can say, well, I have the IP address for Amnesty now, so I can just try to connect to them, no problem. But the trick is that beside DNS filtering, they also employ IP filtering. Okay, so they basically in the central router elements, access to those websites will also be blocked. So not only do you have DNS filtering, but you have also IP-based filtering. So although you can maybe resolve the domain by using a DNS server in Germany, you are still unable to connect to these websites. Okay. Okay, so here's an interesting picture I took. And the reason why I wanted to create another one with the CCC in it, but I didn't have the time last night. So basically, this is something I created to play a little trick with my professor, or with the assistant professor. That was in my final presentation for the masters. I basically took the Chinese version of Firefox. I did go to google.cn. I created two queries, an invalid and a valid, and I basically took two pictures and merged them into one. So now it appears that if you search in China for Dublin City University, no results do come up. And as we have a lot of Chinese students, the professor like, okay, how can we get actually students from over there if we're not found? Okay, which is obviously very insane because I faked this picture, but he never questions the picture, you know, because he thinks that's Google and what they give to me must be real. But apparently it's not, it's faked. Okay, and because we all do trust in a certain way, the search engines, I'd say they are a big vector for adversaries to filter content. And apparently they do this with two ways. First, you can do what they call, or what's referred to as website delisting. So what you do in your result is basically you just take out certain websites that you do not want to appear. So there was a very good website in America where you could actually use the Chinese version of Google against the American version of Google. And if you search for certain events, then in China you will get flowers, and in the American version you will get tanks. So that's one way of doing filtering. And the other thing is you can do keyword censorship. So that means you can just simply deny the fact or deny people the ability to search for certain content. And that's a technique which is heavily employed. All the major search engines in China are filtered. It could be Amazon, Yahoo, Google, Baidu, and all these other search engines. They're all filtered. And well, they have the extent of the filtering varies from search engine to search engine. But basically, the bottom line is that you cannot trust them because they're all filtered. Okay, so what you can do is when you're doing web browsing, a very weird experience happens. Basically, what happens is, okay, you as a user are here, number one, and you try to access a certain target over here, okay? And what you can do, or what happens actually is, as you send your request from number one to number 4 to the target system, basically what happens is your entire connection will be watched out by the Chinese government, and if there are certain keywords in your connection, then basically the connection will be zapped. It will be dropped immediately in real time. Okay, I have no idea on how many protocols this is actually done. I know it's done for HTTP, and if you Google for it, if you read Wikipedia, it's apparently done for instant messaging as well, and I think for other protocols too, but I'm not quite sure for all, whether it's done for all protocols or just for the majority of protocols. I'd say it's done for HTTP, probably for some instant messaging, and for some other ones as well, but we have to figure it out. So what happens is, I send my request as the user, the adversary, so the Chinese government basically observes the connection and if it's unencrypted, and if there is a certain keyword present in my request, then the connection is dropped immediately. And I have a little demo, and the way it works is basically they insert forged reset packets into the connection. So because they observe the connection and then they say, oh, there's keyword X, then they send a reset packet to me, but also to the server. So the server thinks I quitted the connection, and I think the server quitted the connection, and then the connection is dropped. Okay? So that's a very neat way of doing things. And I have a little demo. Again, that's demo number 3. So what I'm going to do now is, I'm on the Chinese server, on my shiny little box in Shanghai, and I'm doing a telnet on my private server, feuerteufel.wolfgarten.com, and I'm going to do speak HTTP to the server, and I'm going to request a website or a file basically. First, I'm going to request a file once I'm connected called test.html. So we're going to see as I type in get/test.html, and then the normal protocol stuff, HTTP 1.0 for instance, and I hit enter twice, and there's the answer. Great, HTTP works fine. So now basically we do the same thing, but I do request a file which does not exist on the remote server, but which I expect is filtered. Okay, so we do the same thing again. I connect to the server via telnet, port 80, and I request get, and then I'm going to request a file called Falun Dafa, which is, or Falun Gong, I think. Falun Gong, yeah. And Falun Gong is a forbidden spiritual movement. And the moment I click, enter twice, you see the connection is closed. Okay? And this is in real time, okay? So as I press enter twice, the connection was reset. Okay? So I wonder how they do it, because, I mean, for 130, 150 million users, that's a lot of stuff to do. You can do it with pattern matching and so on, but still I think it's a lot of stuff to do, and I was very surprised when I saw this. Yeah, I was very surprised, and obviously there are countermeasures that you can use, and I'm going to show you one which works very nicely against this way of cutting connections, but apparently it works quite well. Okay, so even if they employ DNS filtering, and if the DNS filtering does not work, then they have still other means to block you from accessing certain traffic or certain websites. Okay, certain information. Okay, now obviously what we need to do is we need to figure out a way to circumvent the filtering. Yesterday there was a big talk. From the guy that apparently wrote this Tor software, that about 35,000 people are using Tor in China already. So I decided to skip the section on Tor in this presentation, because yesterday the guy told us already a lot about it, and basically it works fine. So what you can do is you can use Tor in China. Okay, Tor works fine, but for 35,000 out of 130 million users, that's not a whole lot. So I decided to take a look at maybe easier, in some way, methods to defeat the Great Wall of China. Okay, so what can you do? Basically, you have to figure out how the filtering works. That's the most important bit. So basically, you have to attempt to enumerate the magnitude and the strictness of the filtering. So what this means is basically you have to map out the rule set if you're speaking in firewall terms. Okay, so you have to check out what happens if I access this website. Is it DNS filtering? Is it IP filtering? Are my packets dropped? For instance, what happened, maybe a little side story from my experiments. For instance, when I did the DNS experiments with resolving 50 domains in China and 50 domains in Germany, I couldn't access my server for 3 or 4 days. Okay, and this happened quite often. So I had often the problem that although the server was alive and running and up and running in China, I couldn't reach it from Germany. Okay, so basically I emailed and faxed the provider in China. I was like, hey guys, what's the story? I paid for this. I need access to the server. They're like, hey, it's sitting here. It works. No problem. Yeah. So apparently, and that's what I saw from packet traces, my packets are in between. I just dropped. Okay, so as soon as I enter the Chinese network, basically they dropped. So this happened quite often. It was very annoying because I couldn't do my work when the server was not available, apparently. Okay, so then when you figured out how strict the filtering is and how it works, for instance, the reset packets I showed you earlier, then obviously you can make a guess on what kind of techniques they employ. They could use layer 3, 4 filtering, they could use layer 3, 4, and 7 filtering. So this is something you have to enumerate. And once you identify this information, you have to come up with an appropriate way how to circumvent it. So in a nutshell, it's basically the same way as you would as you would bypass any firewall, but it has some neat properties I want to show. So basically, the Clayton method is the first method I want to show you. The Clayton method was discovered by a guy called Richard Clayton, and it was discovered by, I think, him in June 2006. He's a researcher from the University of Cambridge. So how does it work? We have the same setup as before. We have a user that tries to access the internet and access the target. Okay, so we have still the adversary that's inspecting the traffic as it goes along. But now the question is, what happens if on both sides of the connection, so you need to have control of both sides of the connection, which is not always, it's probably not often the case, but if you have full control over the user as well as this target system, then what you can do in your firewall is just ignore reset packets. Okay, so packets with the reset flag set. Okay, so now basically, although the advisory here is injecting forged reset packets into the connection, so sending basically reset packets to you, but also to the target system, as you ignore them, the connection will just simply continue. Okay, so interestingly, the Chinese government, they only inject, they don't drop the traffic, they just inject forged reset packets to both ends of the connection, and but the data flows. Okay, so if you have a way of ignoring these packets, the connection will proceed unhindered. Okay, so that's one way to circumvent the current way the filtering works in China. But there's a little trick here. Obviously, if this is you as the user and you want to access in China and you want to access CNN.com, apparently you have no control over their firewall rule set. So although theoretically it's a perfect method and it's very interesting and it's easy but also very effective, in practice it's not very feasible because you can't tell CNN please ignore reset packets. Okay, so you can do a lot of things but probably not that. Okay, so it works but it's not perfect. So you can use alternative DNS servers. And if they are tamper-free, if you use, okay, they must not be located in North Rhine-Westphalia because they are manipulated as well. But if they are, let's say, in Bavaria or some other country outside Germany, then then basically it should work. Okay. So and apparently, interestingly, is that when I did the testing from China, I saw that you can make DNS connections to any DNS server in the world. That was no problem. Okay. But as I said before, the DNS requests came back to me untempered. Yeah, that's a question. Okay, I can repeat your question if you want.
Well, first of all, this is well, not the poem. I'm talking about the fact things from that perspective.
I'm living in China.
The feature is that
I'm wondering whether you tested this DNS stuff
in there,
just from the dedicated
like,
server
have
you
you ever
rented.
wondered
Yeah.
I don't know if you've experienced it yourself, but I've certainly heard a lot of applicants say that, you know, Apple has this way of making every release faster on the same hardware.
Okay. So the question was basically whether I tested this only on a dedicated server or whether I tested this also on a cable modem in China. As I said, to answer your question, no. Because I did only rent the server and I was not there in person, so I couldn't test it and I didn't have any contacts. So I thought that the best way to do it would be to rent a server. Obviously, if you're an end user, this probably will be different. But as I come later in this presentation, or maybe I can do this now, I would love to do actually some more research. So if you are willing and I would like to join, and maybe there are other people in the room that like to join us, we can rent a new server. We can use, if you have the DSL modem or cable modem in China, then perfect. Let's start some research. So we can figure out how it actually works. There's a lot of work to be done, to be honest, and I couldn't do everything. So it's just a start. So if you're interested, we can do some research. Yeah, I do. To be honest, I was thinking a lot for a long time whether I should go to China to an internet cafe and try to do the stuff directly there, but for some reason I chose not to. Yeah. There's a question in the back.
This is like a salt, like they verify that everything is fine and dandy, and if it is,
Yeah. That's a big problem as well. Yeah, the question, or there was a comment saying basically the filtering is different depending on which part in China you're actually in. Well, of course, it's a big country, and so we would have, in order to do some, let's say, representative research, we would need access to different servers or different places in China. That's something I didn't have. If there are people in the audience that can support me or like to join me on this, you're very welcome. Of course, yeah, because I didn't have enough time, and I didn't have contacts in China, so I did this the way I thought it would be the best, but obviously there are other ones, and we could all work on this together if you like to. So coming back to, because we can answer some questions later on, coming back to this presentation, as I said, the DNS servers, you're free to use them, and you're free to resolve CNN, for instance, without any problems, okay? But then again, as I said, they also employ IP filtering, so I wasn't able, although I was able to resolve the domain correctly, I was unable to access it because they employ IP filtering, okay? So, yeah, bad Troy, basically. We have to figure out other ways of circumventing the Great Firewall of China, okay? So you can use alternative proxies. Yeah, that's something I tried and it didn't work, so yeah, we can skip this. Basically, my idea was, okay, to set up a central proxy in Germany and then send all requests to that proxy and then just use it to get onto the internet. And the same filtering applies as before, so if I try to access a certain website, then there will be the reset packet sent and my connection is dropped again. Okay, but we can use something called tunneling, okay? And, okay, something I couldn't figure out, and maybe somebody in the audience can say to me, I assume encryption is illegal in China. So, yeah, I wonder why they gave me SSH access for my dedicated server anyway. Because if it's not allowed, then that was illegal already. But apparently you can use any protocol you like. I tried DNS tunneling, I tried ICMP tunneling, SSH tunneling, what else did I do? HTTP tunneling, SMTP, I tried a whole lot, and they all worked. Okay, so that's cool. But I found out that for some protocols, for instance, I tried ICMP tunneling with a program called ptunnel, ping tunnel basically. The problem is that DNS resolution is still done in China. Okay, so as the DNS resolution is subject to filtering or manipulation, this is not a cool approach because you're still subject to filtering. So you have to figure out other ways to bypass this. Well, as you're all very technical aware of what you can do with SSH, yeah, it's a perfect way out. And I spoke with guys from Force 10, and Force 10 is a hardware provider that's used, because I gave this talk before at the D6 in Germany, and they have replaced all the hardware with hardware from Force 10. And the Force 10 guys were saying basically, well, look, we delivered hardware to China, and so did Cisco and Juniper. And for instance, we could drop SSH connections as soon as we see your the handshaking bit. But apparently, for some reason, at the moment, they're not doing this. So what you could do, you could just encapsulate your data in a transport protocol, send it to what's called a gateway host, that will unwrap your request into the whatever protocol you're actually trying to speak, and will send it to the target system. Okay, so that's not something special, but I will give a short demonstration on how to do SSH filtering. This is not special, you all know how this works, but it is a proof of concept that even in China there is a way of accessing amnesty.org. Okay, so what you do is, obviously I log into my private server, that's no problem. I have 3 different windows here, a German server, which I'm going to start a proxy, the exported display of the Chinese server, and the SSH tunnel to my Chinese server. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm starting a proxy server on my German server. So there's Squid starting up, no problem. Now what I do now is now I connect to my Chinese server, and once I'm connected, I'm just doing normal port forwarding to actually establish a session between China and Germany, which is secured by SSH. And again, this is not something I need to explain. You all know how this works. So SSH, MySL, and so forth. And basically, what happens then, as when I export the display, so I'm saying basically port 5000 should be locally on the box in China should be forwarded to port 3128, listening on the local host of my private server in Germany. Okay, so once this connection is established, it's cryptographically secure, and yeah, if this now works. Okay, so I'm now logged in. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to export the display of the Chinese server. That's what I did. I'm changing the proxy settings on the Chinese. This is basically the exported conqueror of the Chinese server, so it's a bit slow. But if I change the proxy settings to localhost port 5000, this will be forwarded to my German server, to the script running on that server. And as you will see now, this is one way of accessing amnesty.org. And the good thing is that DNS resolution is actually done on the server in Germany. And as this is not really subject to any filtering, I'm able to bypass this. And this works. So it's a very basic mechanism, but I think it's very powerful, and you all know how good SSH for these kind of things is. Okay. Okay, so that's one way you can do. So as I said before, I would like to more or less close this. Already what I'm looking for is people that are interested in doing some more research. Maybe if you're doing your diploma thesis, or if you just like to work on this, we would need, as I said, about 110 euro to rent a server, or if there are people in the audience that are already in China, perfect. Then we can set up the infrastructure like that, or if you have contacts to universities, that's even better. So give me a shout if you're interested. I would really love and appreciate your support. Okay, so yeah, I'm coming to an end. As you saw, that's to be honest, a very sophisticated and pervasive way the filtering currently works in China. And my work did investigate some of the technology behind it. I also published a paper on my website devtarget.org, and also various information from my studies. So if you're interested in maybe studying IT security, you can take a look at the stuff over there as well. And but I think, and that's basically what the tour guy yesterday said as well, we need easier methods to give the ordinary user the ability to bypass the filtering, so in order to make it collapse. Okay, so that's it. Thanks a lot, and I'm now ready for answering your questions. Thanks.
So I showed those keys in the picture because we were talking about macOS 10 and the TPM. So yeah, so this is in the...
Hello. Now, what is the state of IP version 6 in China? Does anybody know about that? Because it is my understanding that IP version 6 mandates the implementation of IPsec, and that would basically solve all these problems in one go.
Well, what I can say is that I know that China tried to, or actually had the idea of developing IPv5 for some reason. And I don't know, to be honest, what the current status is. Maybe the guy living in China can say something. Can you get like cable modem access with IPv6 in China? Okay, so the answer was they only offer IPv4. Obviously, IPv6 would incorporate IPsec, and then a lot of this stuff would be way easier, but at the moment there's only IPv4 as far as I know. Okay? More questions? There were questions in the back somewhere?
Okay, if you just give the microphone back to the next guy having a question, or we'll take questions from here with that microphone.
Hi there. I missed the beginning of your talk, but I was just wondering, when I walked in I was a bit surprised because I'd heard almost an identical sort of talk a couple of years ago in Toronto, and I was reminded of the work of Ron Diebert, who's a University of Toronto professor in political science, who's been doing work with the Citizen Lab. And he has multiple graduate students pulling up websites and worldwide research in terms of looking at internet censorship.
Yeah, there's a very nice website from Harvard University as well. And the guys from Toronto, they're also in the OpenNet initiative. So basically, when I finished my work, I saw that already people were working on this, so I sent them my paper as well. And it's with the OpenNet initiative at the moment. Yes. So, yeah.
Okay, because it's very similar research that they've been doing for a number of years.
Well, I apologize. I didn't copy anything. So, to be honest, I was unaware that there was already a similar presentation. Okay. Here's a question in the front. As
far as I know, most users in China are using the internet by cell phone. Do you see any way to circumvent the Great Firewall for users who are using the cell phone for accessing the internet?
That's a very hard question because I didn't try it. But as I'm working at T-Mobile, and you could just use any IP technology you want to use. So even over GPRS, you can just use SSH, for instance. So maybe if you have a cell phone in China, you can maybe tell us more about this. But I assume if there's no modification being done with the actual GPRS implementation or usage in China, then you can just use normal TCP/IP tools, because by the end of the day, this thing speaks IP as well. So, for instance, over the German GPS, I use SSH very often.
Those CDMA cards are very popular and very cheap, and everybody uses them, so nobody uses GPRS, and
okay.
I did not see any big difference between access from the DSL at home or using the CDMA card.
I would say, I haven't tested it, but I would say it's the same, to be honest.
Yeah, but what's definitely not the same is if you are a foreigner from a foreign country and then you try to buy something in China, they totally handle you different.
Okay, so maybe next year you can do something from inside, the inside report from China, maybe.
Yeah, let's do it together.
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
Want a shell account?
Yeah, okay, that's perfect. Okay, so are there any more questions? There's a question in the back, two questions in the back.
Hello, I was very interested to hear about the RST packets that are coming in that
Yes.
are being injected from the network, and
Yes.
any of the techniques that we've been seeing are essentially vulnerable to getting reset from the middle. I wonder, did you do any further analysis of the reset packets coming in, looking where they were coming from, what timing they had, what the hop count was, this kind of thing, the TTL? Would you care to comment on that, please?
Yes. To answer your question in a short word, no, because Richard Clayton from the University of Cambridge, as I mentioned before, he wrote a full paper on this, and the information you're looking for is mostly in his paper as well. He didn't look into the TTL stuff so much, but there's a lot of information in his paper already, which I didn't want to do again. So if you go to Google and search for what's it called? I think defeating the Great Firewall of China or something along those lines, then you will get his paper and it's all in there. Okay? More questions? There was one question somewhere. Yes.
I don't share the certainty that widespread use of IPsec would solve that, because what they can do is just require that IPv6 implementations used in China accept a man-in-the-middle attack from the ISP, or they just don't get any internet. It won't be a silver bullet.
Yeah, that's very true. For instance, something which I'm a bit unsure about is also the use of encryption. What about SSL keys, for instance? Will they actually terminate SSL connections as well if they have the keys? Maybe as an operator of some system, you need to give them the keys. I'm not quite sure whether this happens or whether this is done. But for IPv6, for IPsec, the problem is the same, of course. Yeah, there's still a man in the middle, and so I am not. Yeah, you're probably right. I'm not sure whether this will be the silver bullet, but it will be one more way to try.
There's the question here in the back.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
What do you know about IPv9? According to Heise Online, that's a new addressing technique for the Chinese network.
Oh, was it 9? Okay, I thought it was 5.
It's a bit like telephone numbers.
Okay.
And they are developing it.
To be honest, I don't know anything about it. I thought it was called IPv5. Those crazy Chinese, I don't know.
IPv9, according to Heise.
Okay. No, I don't know anything about this. I have to deny. Sorry. Are there any more questions?
Yeah, just one. There is a lot of work about how we can understand how filter work and so on. But do you have any idea if there is a centralized database about government capacity? I mean, who are working with those governments? Which are the companies who are selling the material? Who are the consultants who are hired by the government, like in China? Because I mean, there is more than 30,000 persons working in China, but. Yes. I mean, there is Cisco, there is an Occidental company selling technology. There is any centralized information about who is selling what and which can help you maybe to work?
I tried to figure out this information because obviously I wanted to know what I'm up against. but I was unable to find any information. I really contacted some companies and they said, look, we don't comment on our business and that's it. So I know it from Force 10 because I talked to Force 10 people, and if you read the papers and if you read other articles, it always says, well, it uses Juniper and Cisco. But you will probably not get a list of all the companies involved. Yeah. I tried to do this really hard because I wanted to know, but it's the same with the filtering techniques. They don't give you information how it works. You can try to experiment with it, but you cannot figure out how it really works. Yeah. I think there was one more question over there. And there's another question here. Okay.
Hello? Okay.
Yeah.
My question is, what information is there about the infrastructure of China? Is the distributed filtering with the providers helping, or is the central gateway of the government?
Yeah, what I found out is that it's at least on the experiments I did, it's done on the central infrastructure of China Telecom, which is something like Deutsche Telekom here, or France Telecom, for instance. So it's done at the backbone providers. Yeah, and also on the incoming points of the Chinese network. So as soon as you enter China, basically, and go out, obviously. There's one more question, yeah.
Yeah, when you've done your test, have you been disconnected from the network, completely disconnected from all the rest? Because I heard about the Freenet project that the Chinese government harvests all the nodes they're running the network and try to block them. What do you know about the social engineering that Chinese government is doing? Because Freenet is now using darknet. Is it a good way, or is it the government filtering, harvesting all the network to find people who is trying to hack the network and stopping them directly?
Yes, as I said before, I had the problem that my server was often unavailable. And it may be coincident, but it was always the case when I did some action. So let's say I did the 50 domain resolves in a row on the Chinese server. Let's say half an hour later the server was blocked. So these kind of things. But I'm not quite sure. Maybe the provider did give my address or my purpose to to these authorities. I don't know. I think for some reason when I registered the server, I mixed up my old German address with my new one. I don't know. Maybe I can't go into China anymore. I don't know. I don't know how it works. Okay, so maybe there was one more question, and then we should all go.
Yeah, I would like to know. You talked about this real-time keyword filtering.
Yes.
Is it done by the content too?
Yes. I saw it for HTTP. You can actually, the filtering is done only on the name of the file you're requesting, but also on the content.
So when your test.html is the content like free Tibet, it would be blocked too?
Yeah, yes. That's what I saw at least.
Yeah.
Comment, question, anyone?
Maybe I misunderstood something, but you told it probably won't be easy to say to CNN.com to not drop reset
to drop reset packets, yes.
Yes, but you also said your proxy would also drop reset packages, but I think it would be easy to tell your proxy not to acknowledge reset packages.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And wouldn't that be a solution?
What I said when I used the proxy with an unencrypted connection between Germany and China, then the Chinese, because they were observing the connections, were then sending reset packets to both ends of the connection. And as you said correctly, yes, that's the way. If you make your proxy ignore reset packets, then that's one way to go. The problem is still that the adversary, i.e. the Chinese government, can still see all your connection because it's unencrypted. But you're right, it works. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah. Okay, one more question, comment.
I think you have nothing to fear to come to China. Actually, I don't think that the government will care about some foreigner just trying to check out their methods. And you can also imagine what kind of avalanche you will release if they just set some foreigner into prison. I mean, they are much more perceptive about their own people, but if you come there as a foreigner, it's totally different. And Chinese law even deals different with if somebody hits a foreigner, then somebody hits the Chinese person.
Well, I'm working. The thing is, I'm working at Deutsche Telekom or T-Mobile. I have a lot of holidays, so maybe I spend my next holidays in China.
Yeah, actually, I do have a guest room.
Oh, perfect.
You're invited.
Thanks. So thanks everyone for watching and questioning me and so on. If you have questions, always going to be around, so you can always ask me and we can drink a beer or something. Okay. Bye bye.